guys, Sarah here from Highland Haven Australian Shepherds and Highland Haven Dog Training, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 2 of Dog for Thought. Joining me is my co-host, daughter, and dog trainer extraordinaire, Sophie.
Hi, everyone.
What's going on, Soph? What's up in Dogland?
Nothing much. I feel like we've been pretty quiet lately. So, I've been doing a lot of trick training with Twiggy downstairs.
Well, yeah, because it's January, so we always are totally dead in January.
Yes.
Which is, you know, when you own your own business, you like wish for days off, and then because you work all the time, and then when you have the time off, you're like, oh my god,
Yeah,
completely freaked out.
There's no like in between, like, you know, when we
Feast or famine.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
I was laying in bed last night, wringing my hands over it, and I was like, you know, we've survived 2 Januaries. This is the 3rd January. We're going to survive this one too.
Yep.
It's going to be fine.
Yep.
And try to enjoy the time off. Of course, like everybody experiences this, I think, or at least most people, is that when you have the time to do things around the house, you don't have the money, right? You feel weird about spending the money because you're not bringing anything in. When you have the money, when things are flush, you're too busy to do any work on the house. So I've been trying to find a happy medium in there somewhere where doing small projects, a lot of DIY stuff, that doesn't cost a lot of money right now while I have the time, and then save the big expensive stuff for when I feel more comfortable paying somebody to do work.
Yep.
So I think that's where we are vis-a-vis the house.
Well, luckily we actually have things to do, like, because last January we didn't want to invest any money into that house, so it was just wringing our hands, you know, making sure like nothing, you know, happened. And then but now we actually have projects to do, like, especially you, because you need to keep busy.
Yeah,
I can really, you know.
Right. So you've been taking Twiggy down into the training room because it's nice and quiet down there.
It's quiet down there. You know, it's a little chilly because we don't have any heat on in there.
Well, I'm not paying for heat. There's nobody in there.
No, I agree. But like, I don't mind it. It's better than being outside in the cold. You know, I don't have wind chill in there.
It's such a beautiful room to work in.
It's a great room. I have so much room to be able to do all these new tricks. The problem with Twiggy is I can teach her the most complicated trick in like 20 minutes.
I don't know if the tricks that you suggested you were going to teach her yesterday, and I said, okay, that'll take 5 minutes. What are you going to do for the rest of the hour that you're in there with her?
Well, then I looked up difficult tricks online.
Yeah, but difficult for who? I mean, difficult for somebody who's not a dog trainer and a dog who maybe doesn't have high drive or already doesn't have experience learning things. Like, once you teach a dog to learn, once you open their mind up to learning, they learn quicker, right? Because they realize, oh, she's actually communicating something to me. Let me try to figure out what it is, because there will be a reward at the end of this, right?
Yeah.
So it's a pursuit of dopamine, right? Amping up into the reward, the dopamine gets higher and higher and higher until you get to the reward, and then it drops, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, once you teach a dog to learn, all they want to do is learn, which makes sense. It's wonderful.
And I pretty much raised her to only learn.
Right. So she's going to be like, okay, I know what we're doing. I know this. Okay, I see what this is. I see what she wants from me. What is, you know, so she's going to learn that stuff quick.
And then like on the, like, it was like top 5 difficult tricks for dogs to learn. It went from like the easiest to the hardest. And the hardest was like getting your dog to jump on your back. I taught that to her the other day without even looking at a video.
Yeah. So this
within like 2 steps, and I was like, oh, like, this is so like, where are the hard tricks?
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe set up some agility jumps in there.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I like teaching her the tricks and then teaching her the she has a harder time. I can have her follow my hand and get her to do it with my hand. Sure. Super easy. But getting her to then associate that, no, I'm not going to use my hands anymore, and replacing it with a word, she has a much harder time absorbing that. So then I start using words and then asking for different commands using just the words and not giving her any verbal or hand signals.
Yeah, because a dog, when you give verbal and a hand signal, they will ignore the verbal. They will always look at the hand signal, which is why we don't teach hand signals to our training dogs, because one, it's just an extra layer of complexity that's completely unnecessary when you're talking basic manners and things, but also because the dog will ignore your words, and words are more useful, I mean, generally for people right? You want to sit in the Barca Lounger and be able to say yes or no from across the room, not have to get their attention and wave your hands and do all kinds of stuff. So yeah, again, that makes sense. I think the hardest thing in my experience teaching my own dogs when I'm doing like tricks, right, is away stuff. So teaching them to run away from you, go around a jump over it towards you and come to you. That's a really complicated skill. And it's a high level understanding that I want you to go away from me. It's very hard to teach because conceptually it's hard for them. So if you want something really challenging, I would set up a jump, just a low jump, and work on teaching her to sit in front of you, but then away around the jump and come towards you, and see if you can do that. But I would look up some videos on the best way to teach that, because there's some really nifty tricks to teach them that.
She kind of does know how to do that though, because that machine, that fetch it machine, I can tell her to go grab the ball. I could be sitting on the couch, tell her to go grab the ball. She'll go find her ball, grab it, and then I'll tell her to go play. So that's her go play by yourself command. And then she'll go to the machine and drop the ball on the machine across the room and play with herself.
Play with herself? No,
yeah.
You don't mean play with yourself.
No, like she would play with the machine by herself.
Play by herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. But that's different than saying, go past the jump, take a left, come around towards me, jump over it, and come to me. When I did obedience competition when I was your age with my shepherds, the hardest thing for me to teach them was the away command. It's at one point in the ring, you have to stand at one end of the ring and you have to say away, and they have to run away from you. Right? You also see this in Schutzhund, right? And they have to not stop until I'm not sure. I know in Schutzhund they don't stop until you tell them to stop, and then they're supposed to turn and lay down and face you.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And you see them do like the slide stop, the really, really good ones. It's always fascinating to watch those. In the ring, in the AKC obedience ring, I'm not sure I remember it correctly. I'm not sure if they just run to the end of the ring and stop at the fence and then turn around and sit, or whether you have to tell them to stop. I forget exactly which, but that's a really hard skill.
Okay.
So if you want hard skills, I'll give you hard skills to teach, because conceptually it's hard for dogs around that. It's not hard for Twiggy to figure out how to jump on your back or roll over or play dead, or any of those things are easy for her.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, okay, I have a good hour to teach her these things.
5 minutes later.
5 tricks in 20 minutes. Like, what the heck, man?
Yeah, it's good for you. It's always good to practice sort of that kind of trick training, because you really have to work on your marking skills, right? Because you've got to mark the progression. As they get closer and closer to what you want them to do, you're marking it, right? So that they continue to progress forward in understanding of what you want. And marking it, whether you're marking it with a clicker or a yes or whatever, and then giving a treat. That the timing is so specific on that kind of stuff to be effective. It's really good for you to practice. It's good for me to practice too, but
you've done this already.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, I could certainly use the practice as well. But to continue to teach something like that, I don't really have the patience to teach tricks. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy doing straight up obedience. I enjoy working on the whole dog, like the understanding of the environment and yes and no, and the feedback of what you can do in your environment and basic manners and things like that. I prefer that, which is good because that's what we teach as dog trainers.
I feel like I prefer that too, but because I have all this time with Twiggy, she doesn't know paw, she doesn't know rollover, she doesn't know any of those things because I don't really find them valuable. It's not valuable in my opinion for
it's
the
silly
paw
fluff for sure.
It's for fun, oh, isn't this so cute? Look, paw or rollover or whatever. Where I much rather go mountain biking with her and be able to recall her when I see a person or things that are going to happen in real life situations. That's right. More or less. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but I think that I don't, I'm older than you and I still don't have the patience. I definitely didn't have the patience to do this kind of stuff when I was your age, like trick training. Yeah. It just wasn't my thing. I like to see progression, and maybe when you're teaching a dog that comes in for training, that knows nothing, and most of them know almost nothing. I mean, they do know, almost all dogs come in understanding what the word sit and the word down means, and to some extent what the word stay means, but they don't, they come to us specifically because they don't have good manners. That's why they're with us, right?
Well, I also think, so I think most dogs know like a false down and a false sit, right? So, and then we teach them true down and true sit, which is, yeah, when you have a cookie and you ask your dog to sit, they sit, you give them the cookie, and then they jump up and run away, right? But asking them for a sit, walking around them, jumping until you release them from the sit is, in my opinion, is like a true sit.
Right, but my point is they understand what the word sit means.
Yeah, they
sit
do
means put my butt on the floor.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So we don't normally, and people will tell us, well, they know sit, they know down. What are you going to teach them? Okay, well, everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have just scratched the surface. We're going to teach now everything underneath that. And it is helpful when they already know what the word means.
Yep.
I mean, that's helpful to us. It saves us 10 minutes of work because that's really all it would take to teach that.
And it's interesting because once you do the groundwork, so once like they understand the word, they understand what you want from them, trick training is super easy because then they're already in tune.
They're primed to learn, which is why we work with our infant puppies, right?
Yeah.
Our very, very young puppies. If anybody listening has watched our old puppy videos, you'll see that in the last few litters, I've started to teach them to do sit stays and things like that as a group. And it's my favorite thing. When I walk back into the whelping box after playtime is over and I can recall, 8 5-week-old puppies into the whelping box and wait for them all to sit and then give them all cookies. It blows my mind every time. And what that does is that primes our puppies that we sell. They're already primed to learn. You can either use it and, grow with it, right? Add to it, or you can not use it and watch it atrophy.
Yeah.
Right. It never disappears though, totally, because they're so young and it's literally priming their brain that this 2-legged person, bipedal person is communicating with me, and whoa, I understand what she wants. It just blows their minds, and it wires their brain in a different way, particularly when they're super, super young, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. I used to, before I started working actual commands with them, I would call them, I would say puppy, 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 and encourage them to come in and just pick them up and plop them in one by one and, over the little gate so that they're in their whelping box. And then it occurred to me that, gee, I don't even have to do that work. Let me work with them. And at the speed at which they learn that, these incredibly young puppies.
Well, they have nothing in their brains.
Yeah, it just still blows my mind.
No, it really is pretty amazing. But I guess maybe because I grew up in this environment, I'm just like, oh, like they're super malleable, you know?
Yes, but
where like you didn't have the same experiences that I did growing up. So
right, and I don't use sit, right? Because it's a manding behavior. Manding meaning they're trying to figure out what you want without you asking for it, right? So I literally just sit there. I stand there. And each one that comes in, eventually they'll sit, right? Because it's just natural. I'm just standing there. Eventually one of them will sit, reward it. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then once you do it the second time, right? Now it's a pattern.
And then they start observing each other and it's like, oh, well, so-and-so sat, so maybe I should do that.
Yeah, it's really, it's so amazing. And there are videos on Instagram. If you scroll way back, there are some great videos on our Instagram showing that. I just absolutely love it.
Well, hopefully we can show it soon with
Evie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Evie gained 4.5 pounds, which I was really pleased to hear. Exactly when she should have gained. That's actually a little bit more than I had expected. So I was very pleased with her weight gain.
And she looks pregnant.
She does. I mean, like not super pregnant, but we can definitely tell that she looks fuller.
She's so less thin. So the fact that she looks full and kind of like almost like a normal, like kind of spayed adult is like rare for her because she's just such a thin dog because she's one of Journey's puppies.
And she's also very young.
Yeah.
So she sort of lost her shape. Like her contours, underneath, it's sort of more, she looks more boxy. which is good. That's a really good sign.
And she's super mellow. Like usually she does these giant loops of circles when she sees the dogs, and she could only do like maybe 3 or 4 circles, and then she was like,
yeah.
So like, you're pregnant.
I'm confident that she's pregnant, but no, it's never 100% until you see that X-ray, because dogs have such a funny physiology vis-a-vis pregnancy. Mm-hmm. They really can trick you, not intentionally, of course, but they really can look and act pregnant, and it's a false pregnancy. It's a crazy thing. It's not like normal animals. Canines are a little different that way. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so you've been teaching Twiggy some commands. I did a long video yesterday. I used the training room yesterday to groom my 7 dogs. And I filmed a long form video that's also on YouTube right now. So like we talked about last week, I'm back in the groove of trying to groom them regularly, which makes me feel like a better dog owner. And we've been definitely had a good consistent schedule of walking half the group one day and then the other half the next. Consistently. Not Ruby. Ruby's too old to walk. 14 is too old to walk any kind of distance. And I got to be careful of Ty because he has some arthritis issues. So once a week is enough for him, and then it usually takes him a day or two to recover.
But not Rem. She's 12. Still kicking. The only thing you have to do is scream really, really loud for her. Otherwise, she can't hear you. Yeah,
so Rem's got some deafness issues. Mm-hmm. She's not totally deaf by any means, but she definitely has some hearing loss for sure. Mm-hmm. And she's a touch of dementia. Yeah. Which we've never experienced before. And it's, it's almost kind of funny, when she's like looking the other direction and you're yelling her name and she's looking around in the sky looking for you and you're like, girl, I'm literally 5 feet behind you. Just turn around.
It's the funniest is she stands at the door and there's like this little weird gap.
You can go past the glass door and look in the window next to it.
And you're like, come on in.
You
and
open the door and she's
like scratching the window. And then you have to go around and touch her. And she's like, yeah, the door's over here. I forgot. You just come in this door like multiple times a day, every day.
And then she does this thing every night at about between 2 and 3 a.m. I need to get a bench, like a nice soft fabric bench for the foot of my bed, which would like have the distance between the floor and the bed. Because she jumps off the bed in the middle of the night because she gets hot, I would assume. And then she wants to get back on the bed, but she can't figure out how to do it always because the sides of the bed have flooring. Only the foot of the bed has the rug, which she needs the traction.
And all the dogs are all over your bed.
Yeah, and so all the dogs are on the bed, and so she can't always, there's not always an open spot where the rug is for traction so she can jump up. So she starts yodeling in between 2 and 3 a.m., which is lovely. Yodeling sounds like, literally, it's like a little yodel.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then I have to say, come on, you can do it. And as soon as I start to talk, generally the dogs on the bed will get up and reposition themselves and usually make space for her to jump up. But if she had a bench, and I've been scouring Facebook Marketplace for a bench at the bottom of my bed, she could jump on the bench and then see how to walk on and walk around everybody. So, she's an older dog. She needs different things from me at this point. But physically, she looks great. She can't jump on the grooming table from the floor anymore.
She used to.
Just a year ago, she could still do that.
From like a standstill. She was always a rabbit.
Yeah. But she seems like a happy girl. She seems to feel well other than that. Yep. She was super spicy yesterday when I was grooming. And, the dogs were sort of playing at my feet. And she got in a little over her head. Started playing with the young dogs. And then had to run underneath the table and look for protection when they played back. So, I'm like, girl, know your age.
Right. They don't, though. Ruby doesn't know her age at all.
Yeah, and then they jump on her and then they splay. Yep. The feet fit and they splay onto the floor. I feel so bad.
And then I'm like, oh, you're going to break a hip. Like, you need to stop.
Yeah. So, old dogs, they need different things.
We should start talking about our topic.
All right. All right, so we should probably get started on our topic today.
Yeah, just because I feel like we have a lot to say about it.
Okay. So what's our topic today?
Resource guarding.
Resource guarding. So we haven't really discussed this topic before. It's not something that we do often as trainers because we have very strong opinions about the safety of a resource guarding dog.
Yeah.
But we've recently revisited it and started thinking about what's the criteria that makes us feel comfortable working with a resource guarding dog. And I think we narrowed it down to basically two things. The size of the dog,
yep,
right? Because I am not doing a Rottweiler who resource guards. I'm just not. The chances of getting bitten as a trainer when you're working with a resource guarding dog are astronomically higher than just working with a regular dog, right? Because that's the whole point, right? And you have to sort of push this subject a little bit to see where they're at times during the training. So size is certainly a thing. So we came up with a size that we're comfortable with, which is basically like 40 pounds and lower or something like that.
Yeah.
It's really three criteria now that I think of it. The second would be, are there young children in the house?
Yeah.
Because we feel very strongly that if there are young children in a house with a dog who resource guards, that's a no-go for us. It also should be a no-go for that dog in that house. That dog should be rehomed.
I mean, kids can't follow rules.
Resource guarding takes very intricate management in some cases, and children can't do that. They can't follow those kinds of rules. And when children get bitten, of course, the stakes are much higher. They can get much more easily injured and permanently disfigured, et cetera, et cetera. So small children in the house with a dog or resource guards is a no-go for us. People make mistakes. Even I'll keep my dog separated. Mistakes happen, and dogs get out, and fences break, and gates aren't latched totally, and then you have an injured child. I don't want any part of that.
Nope.
I don't want any part of giving sort of false hope to somebody that this dog is safe when you're talking about young children. And the third criteria is the type of resource guarding it is. There are really two, in my opinion, two types of resource guarding. There's one that's super hardwired that comes with breed, right? So a dog that has resource guarding bred into them because of the type of job that we wanted from this dog when it was developed. For instance, a Rottweiler, livestock guardian dogs, Mastiffs, dogs who have guarding instincts baked into them. That was their original purpose, to serve humans, in that regard. Those dogs are much harder to cure. The stakes are higher. Success rate is lower, right? It takes more management, more high-skilled training of not only the trainer that you're working with, but also the owner has to be very, very dog savvy and very good at dog training because it's a constant thing. There's the other resource guarding type, which is the much preferred type that maybe has some genetic component to it. For instance, retrievers, right? But it can be managed and almost cured by interacting with them in a different way at home and recreating their emotional response to the guarding.
And also, a lot of the times when it's that type of resource guarding, it usually is brought on by some sort of change, some sort of environmental change that happened in the household.
It's environmentally triggered.
Yeah, yes. Not genetically triggered.
So we're going to call that type 2.
Yeah.
Which is the preferred type. There's type 1 resource guarding, which
genes and genetics
and bloodlines and all of that stuff. That's a much harder thing to deal with. And then that's type 1. And then type 2 is the one that we prefer, that you have a much higher success rate. And one that we can see the environment has triggered it, like you say. So we can talk about Buddy, the most recent resource guarding client that we had.
Yep.
Right. So Buddy is a golden doodle, we think.
Yep. He is definitely first generation. So mom was a poodle, dad was a retriever, and he definitely has more of the retriever side rather than the poodle side, which is where a lot of this resource guarding kind of got pulled out of.
Right. Well, you see that in poodles too, though.
Yeah, but I just feel like it's more of a retriever thing due to the parading and the,
right.
which is all the things that he was doing.
So you talk about parading. So we want to make sure we define this kind of stuff. So in the predatory sequence, right, the eye, the chase, the catch, the kill, bite, dissection, consuming, it's a whole prey sequence. Catching it, having the item, right? That is where you're seeing resource guarding. It's mine. I got it. It's mine. With that part of the sequence, there's also something that some trainers refer to as parading, right? That's not something that we came up with. These are other trainers who have come up with these terms. Parading would be when I have the object, I'm going to sort of literally parade around you with my tail in the air. And
like, look what I have. This is mine. Don't you think it's so cool? Which is very much so a retriever thing. If you've ever interacted with a retriever, they love holding things in their mouths.
Right. And walking around with them. You see it in all breeds, but definitely retrievers have a big propensity to that. And while we're describing this, people are going, oh, yeah. I've seen that. Right. Journey likes to parade a little bit. She has some resource guardy tendencies.
She does.
She does like to parade when she feels full of emotion. What she does is she will carry something around in her mouth. And people constantly make the mistake thinking she's trying to give that item to me. So they go to retrieve it from her. She never shows any resource guarding to people, ever. I don't ever anticipate that happening. She'll give it up if you go to take it from her.
But then she is like, I'm not really interested in it
anymore. And then somebody will throw the ball, whatever it is, right? And then she's like, okay, I don't know what you're talking. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to it's like a pacifier. I wanted to carry this around because I have a lot of emotions right now and I want you to pay attention to me. Not even necessarily touch me, because Journey's got some idiosyncrasies in that way. So that's parading. So we got a call from Buddy. He was, I think he's about a year old. I don't think he's much beyond that. He's between a year and a year and a half.
Did he have his birthday with us, or was that a different dog?
I don't know. I think it was a different dog. Maybe not, though. I don't know.
Okay.
I think he's between a year and a year and a half, from what I recall.
Okay.
So a young dog, and they've been really struggling with him from the day he came home. He's very interesting looking.
He's so cute.
Adorable. He looks like a miniature curly-coated golden retriever.
Yeah.
That's what he looks like.
Yeah.
He'd be a great breed. He's about Twiggy's height. He's small.
He's small.
But, solidly
He's a bit
built.
stocky. And he has it's fur, not hair. So he doesn't need to get groomed. And it's just like this nice little kinky coat with this little curly tail.
Yeah, so if you've ever seen a curly-coated retriever...
Yeah.
He looks like that, but imagine a golden retriever with that curly coat.
Yeah, shrunken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Adorable.
Yeah.
I think it would be a great size and a great breed.
Well, it kind of looks like a Moody, just like without the drive of a Moody.
Okay. Well, he has that real golden face, which, with the big brown eyes, and he is super, super cute.
Yeah.
So we got a call from him, and he had been running roughshod over these people for a better part of a year, where they couldn't basically watch TV at night.
Nope.
He was grabbing things.
Pillows, anything he wasn't allowed to have. Pillows, glasses, shoes, unsafe objects. He would take it, and he would not take his toys, which was interesting.
Yes. So this is not unusual with resource guarding, where they type 1 resource guarding. In my mind, you're more resource guarding, like your food and bones and things like that. High
things
value
that are
items.
mine.
Right.
Yeah.
With type 2, in my experience anecdotally, it is more objects that I know I'm not supposed to have. And in this case, which is somewhat typical, he doesn't guard his food at all.
Nope.
He doesn't guard bones, so he can lay next to you chewing a bone with the bone leaning on your leg. And you can pet him.
Be holding the bone, and he will be chewing it out of your hand, and he's chill.
Right. So what is that? That's information. So when you talk to a client and they start to describe this, that's really important information for me, because that's a dog that's making choices rather than their biology dictating how they feel. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's not a genetic, it is a genetic itch that needs to be scratched in some ways, but it's not that deep genetic propensity that they can't control. This is mine, don't come near it. This is a resource, don't come near it. I was listening to Kim Brophy who is a well-respected trainer, well-known trainer. I was listening to her being interviewed, and she was talking about her partner. I failed to remember her name. Sort of bringing up the theory that everything is resource guarding, like everything.
Yeah, and you brought this up to me, and I was like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. And then you started breaking it down, and I was like, oh, you're totally right.
You want to give me some examples?
So, if your dog's reactive on the leash, they are resource guarding their space and their boundaries and their human and their safety.
Right.
If the dog is, I'm trying to think of other.
Well, if a male dog could be resource guarding a female dog, right?
Yep.
Resource guarding what Twiggy is doing with Journey. Yeah. That is
resource guarding.
When you boil it down, is resource guarding, right? So she is protecting her ability to produce, to carry on her genetics, right? By eliminating someone else who might take the resource, the available male, and carry on their genetics. She's saying, I'm going to eliminate you so that any potential male, of course, this is all, theory, right? They're not really thinking consciously this. I'm going to protect the ability for me to get pregnant and carry on my genetics by eliminating you.
When dogs bark in the car at other people outside the car, they're guarding their
protecting
resource.
Their space, and their safety.
So pretty much anything you can kind of think of that is like kind of a weird behavioral issue you're having them, if you break it down, they're protecting a resource, which is, it's just not seen as resource guarding, because we think of resource guarding, we think of a bone or food or whatever, but everything's a resource.
Everything is, when you're talking about safety, when you're talking about the ability to carry on your genetics, so breeding ability, when you're talking about a food, right? So any kind of nourishment, territory would be safety, and also the ability to eat, right? So I'm going to protect my territory because this is maybe where I hunt and get my, whatever, the prey that I eat. So that's an interesting way of thinking about resource guarding. That it is, and I like it in that it takes it from an aberrant behavior, right, to I get it. And I've tried to remind you and myself regarding Twiggy, this is a natural behavior. Yeah, it is incompatible and sad and painful for us because of what it does to the the ability
pack dynamic.
The pack dynamic, the ability for her to enjoy a fuller life, right? That's sad, but the behavior is not aberrant. It's not, there's not a miswiring in her brain. There's not a chemical thing going on. This is a normal behavior. It's just incompatible.
In the end, she doesn't feel good doing this behavior. She's not willingly doing this behavior because it makes her feel good. She's doing this because of fear. And that's, fear and resource, and it's I don't believe it's a good behavior and it's a good feeling. So maybe her being separated makes her feel more comfortable.
Well, let's talk about that, because she is getting something. So whenever a dog does a behavior loop, even though there are negative consequences either to the dog or to the pack or the environment at large, whatever, there's still is a loop in the brain, a neural pathway in the brain that's giving them the dopamine reward while they're doing it, right? So we talked about this the other day when we were talking about Maya's dog, Eli, and his dog aggression, right? Ultimately, it's bad for them, but they don't see it that way. They're still completing a neural pathway, completing a loop in the brain. There has to be a reward response in the brain for that. But yes, then when you sort of back up and make the picture really wide, you're like, oh, well, this isn't benefiting you. But no, you can't explain that to a dog.
Well, yeah, they don't get it.
By the way, you also can't explain that to a person, because we all know people who have behaviors that are really bad for them, whether it's addiction, right? Or whether it's just interpersonal behavior due to past trauma or, whatever. And they continue to participate in this loop that it has negative consequences, but there's still...
It's familiar, it's comfortable, it's easy.
They're getting some reward in the reward center of the brain with these loops, even though in the end it doesn't benefit you.
Yeah.
So even when you can speak the same language, the person, the individual, has a hard time letting it go. So we can't do that for people.
Yeah.
We certainly can't explain it to our dogs, right? Which is why management, coming back to resource guarding, is a huge part of curing it and making your dog safe in the environment, right? Because you have to set up. It's even more important to set up an environment that is safe, that they can continue to thrive and be successful by taking away situations where they can participate in that loop. Right, unconsciously or involuntarily sort of participate in that loop, so that they can have a happier life, that we can see that they're happier.
Yeah.
So after talking to Buddy's owner for a long time, I think the first initial phone call was like an hour. It was a long time, and then I spoke to them at least one more time, maybe twice more.
I feel like you had 2 more conversations because they were like, if this doesn't work,
he's got to go.
He can't be with us.
And that's a horrible decision. What are we going to do? And they were very much wringing their hands over that, which is totally understandable.
And at this point, he did bite them.
Yes.
And that's why they
left
called us.
marks, not punctures.
But never broke skin, which was also kind of a check in our book that this has been going on for a year, and it just started escalating to putting his mouth on them.
Right. So he was stealing things around the house, like any object he could get his teeth on.
Yeah.
Whether it is a magazine, literally sitting on a table, or
a glove, a pillow,
a piece of firewood,
a pen. I mean, you think of it, he wants to put it in his mouth.
When he was with us, we have these puzzle mats that go on the floor that cushion the floor, and you can take them apart and put them together. And on the edge of these puzzle mats, I'm sure people are familiar when we're describing them. They're the edging that makes the edge of the mat, not the puzzle, a nice smooth edge. So there's these thin pieces that go around for the edging. He was obsessed with those.
Yeah.
He would just take, and then he would pull off an edging piece and run around with it, which drove me crazy. It took a long time for us to get him away from that habit. So anyway, we talked to her. I felt, the other thing is, the reason we had so many conversations with her is because, of course, she wanted to make sure we were the right trainers for them, because they'd already gone to at least one other trainer, maybe 2, and spent a significant amount of money with other trainers and with no result. So they were like, well, I'm going to invest in this. I want to, for obvious reasons, they want to make sure that we're the right trainer for them. But also I want to make sure that I'm never, and this is all for regular training dogs too, never setting up false hope or unrealistic expectations. I want to make sure that you are really clear on what I believe we can achieve with your dog and what is not achievable and will need to be managed or lived with, right?
And I mean, you told them like the first couple weeks, if we don't see an improvement or in a way that we can get Buddy to be in a safe environment in their home, that we would just count the rest for boarding and then just send them home and they can figure out.
Right. I told them within the first few days, we're going to be able to determine whether we think this is a bad wiring in the brain, which you see some of that as well. A dog who just isn't right mentally. They're rare, but I have seen them in my career.
And it's anytime I have seen them personally, I know we worked together during this, they've always been doodles. They've always been like golden doodles.
Yes.
So that's why we were also kind of wary, because we have experienced like just bad wiring in golden doodles.
And golden retrievers. I've seen it as well over the last 30 years. Very rare, but I do see it. And when there is literally something miswired in the brain,
there's nothing you can do.
And it's a dangerous dog, and they need to be behaviorally euthanized, which is terrible and painful, but for the best for everyone, including the dog.
Different than what we were talking about with resource guarding, that being genetic. A retriever being aggressive is not bred into their bloodlines.
Yes,
so if a retriever is aggressive, that is bad wiring. That has nothing to do with the other scale of resource guarding.
Right. So if you see a Rottweiler, to go back to pick on Rottweilers, apparently pick on Rottweiler Day, you see an aggressive Rottweiler, you're like, okay, well, that is within the range of normal behavior with this breed. normal in quotes, right? Because we've bred them to be guarding dogs, right? So when you see guarding behavior, i.e. aggression, that is something that we've developed them to be. So we shouldn't be surprised, and it's not abnormal. Now maybe it's
all the way dialed up in this particular breed,
and they're dangerous because of it, but the
it's
base
not abnormal.
Is normal for that breed. When you see a golden retriever that's aggressive to people, that's not normal. That's not what they've been bred for. That's nowhere in the standard. It's not acceptable at all. In fact, they will be eliminated in the show ring if they show aggression to people, because they want to eliminate that behavior from the bloodline completely. So you want to, take that dog out of all kinds of breeding stock, right? So where were we going from this? Where did we start with this? With Buddy and having such a long conversation. Bad wiring.
Yeah.
So yes, so bad wiring is different than all of that. So almost that's like type 3.
Yeah.
Right? Resource guarding. And there's other issues that come. It's not just resource guarding. It's aberrant behavior.
It doesn't really have any, it doesn't show when the behavior is going to pop up. All of a sudden, it's like you just get bit.
Right. And that dog is, first of all, unhappy, dangerous to people, and should be behaviorally euthanized when properly evaluated by somebody who knows what they're looking at.
Yep.
That's not what we were seeing, of course, in Buddy. But I told her if we do see that I will let her know right away. Like, I'm not interested in working with a dog that I don't think can have a good outcome. It makes no sense for us to work with a dog that we don't think can have the best outcome, because then you have an unhappy client. So, I mean, if you want to, boil it down to a business model and money, it doesn't benefit me to work with dogs who don't have a good outcome, because then the people are unhappy and other people are going to hear about that. So I really wanted to be sure that we could help Buddy in a way that made him a safe pet. And I told her within the first week, I'm going to know that. And we will prorate you, charge you for the time that he's with us, send him home, and refund you any other money that you sent us. So they wanted to be sure of that. Completely understandable. I expected Buddy to be a little bit of a dick.
Me too. Because it tends to kind of fall into that category when they are stealing things of just kind of having a bit of an edge to them, which is why they feel like they can claim things as theirs. But it turns out that's not the case at all. He was just so confused.
Right. And anxious, and had a lot of really big feelings. So sometimes resource guarding can go hand in hand with a dominant dog, a dog who's trying to push their weight around. So I expected him to come and be kind of a jerk. Now, to be fair, all dogs are kind of a jerk for the first 24 hours they're with us, and we are understanding of that and empathetic of that.
Which is why we give them the first 3 or 4 days to kind of
like
regulate and feel their feelings and be like, I'm not home. This is such bull. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, and I'm uncomfortable with you, and I'm nervous, and
I don't know you. I'm not in my home. I'm not in my comfy bed. I get it.
So all dogs are kind of dicks the first day or two that they're with us. I expected him to be kind of a dick and stay kind of a dick. To be fair, I don't unlike dogs that are a little bit of a dick, because, Deacon is definitely a bit of a dick.
Twiggy's a dick.
And Twiggy is a bit of a dick.
I like Twiggy.
So it's this underlying sort of willingness to be kind of a jerk to you once in a while. Push back, have a little edge, like you say. That's what we're describing. So I don't dislike dogs who are kind of jerks.
We work with Australian Shepherds. Any single time we have a Aussie that comes in with behavioral issues, they all have a bit of a dick underlying. Yeah. And then we have to break through. So we actually kind of dicky
so it's
dogs.
not really a criticism.
No, it's more of an example of.
It's just an observation.
Yeah.
So, but that wasn't the case with him at all. He's actually a really, really sweet guy who wants to do right. He's not a sycophant. He's not a suck up. But he definitely wants, is very biddable and wants to do things that make him feel good, get a good reward from you. He's very focused on you telling him he's a good boy.
And he's food motivated, but he also will just take attention. So a lot of the times he would take one of those puzzle pieces that you were talking about, and instead of approaching him through, no, drop it, blah, 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 yelling at him and being like very harsh. And
which we wouldn't do.
Yeah.
That's not how you work.
That's not
with
how
resource
you
guarding.
will go into that more depthly. We would say, what do you have? What is that? Let me see it. You're not supposed to have this. And he would be like, oh, I'm not. I just really wanted your affection, which is why I grabbed it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So I think when we sent him home, and we've done 2 lessons with them already.
Yeah.
We talked about that. We talked about how he came to us not knowing that there were 2 sides to this. Like his only experience with grabbing things he wasn't supposed to have were really negative punishers. And when I say punishers, I mean he interpreted it as negative, right? So not necessarily going in with a standard punisher, like a leash correction, right? Or a swat on the butt or whatever, right? That's a regular punisher. If you're going in and you're grabbing something from him and you're prying stuff out of his mouth to get it, that's a punishing response. He's interpreting it as really negative. And for resource guarders, particularly in this case, the reason he's carrying that thing is because he's got big feelings about something.
And he's trying to manage his emotion as is. And now you're going in there with even more emotion and taking away something that he's regulating. So if we're going to kind of compare it to a human, it's kind of like your child has their blankie and they're really excited that their grandparents are here. And you don't want the grandparents to see that they have their banky or their bessie or whatever. So you go over to the kid who's so excited to see their grandparents and you're taking their...
You snatch it away from them.
Yeah.
You go, you can't have that. You're too old for that.
And
what is the kid going to do?
Tantrum. Right. Immediate tantrum. And that's exactly what was happening with him.
Right. So he's an emotional dog. He has big feelings about a lot of things. He's not good with transitions. So going from in the enclosure to coming out in the morning and running around and going outside, immediately he would look for something to carry because that helped him regulate. And we're going to talk a whole episode about regulation, right? So this is a strategy that he developed that helped him manage his emotions, helped him emotionally regulate. And then what the owners would do, and they'd be the first ones to tell you this. So this is not really a criticism. Again, just
observation.
Exactly what was going on. He would grab something that he wasn't supposed to have, and it was either something that they were afraid that he would swallow and get sick or a blockage or whatever, or something valuable like an expensive shoe, right? They would immediately go in there and chase him around, chase him down, and pry it out of his mouth if possible. Or play tug, which is even worse, right? Have the shoe and go, give it to me, drop it, with this super high negative emotion, right? So now you have a dog who's trying to feel better and feel calmer, and you're going in there and pouring gasoline on the fire and making him feel worse. So next time that happens, he's going to clamp down harder. Like, no, I'm not going to give this up because this makes me feel better. Stop doing this, makes me, and it gets worse and worse and worse super quickly. It is a good thing to note, like you said, that it took a long time for him to actually start putting his teeth on them. Many other dogs would have escalated to that much earlier on. But that was a good thing. Now looking back, hindsight is 20/20, and listening to their descriptions and stuff, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see that. It took him a really long time to get there because he's actually a really good guy. He doesn't want to escalate to that.
No, he's not one of those dogs that wants to put his mouth on you at all.
So they do have kids, this couple, but their kids are grown. Their kids are like your age. So they're in their late teens, early 20s, probably all early 20s at this point. So we were comfortable with his size, with the type of resource guarding that we felt he was displaying, and the situation in the household, right? So the 3 criteria. So we took him on as a client. And like I say, we found him to be a really sweet guy. It didn't take us long to figure out that this was just him trying to manage his emotions. And this is how he figured out how to do it. And then when you think, okay, well, retriever, they love to parade. They love to carry things in their mouth. They're very orally fixated. So when you're talking about genetic itches that need to be scratched, we need to give them an outlet to satisfy that itch. Right? If we try to suppress it, so we never tried to teach him to not carry things. That wasn't our goal. Our goal was to provide him things that he could carry right? Lots of toys and bones that he could carry around, or sticks or whatever. And when he did have something, we worked very carefully on removing that in a way that was not confrontational. There was no punisher involved, right? So that he could see the other side of it, which is, I can say you can't have this and take it from you, but see what a good boy you are. And that wasn't a big deal. He never really saw the other side of that. He only saw the one side, which is, when you're coming towards me when I have something, bad things are going to happen. I'm going to feel worse. So now I'm even more anxious and more stressed and need the object even more to regulate, and you're trying to pry it out of my mouth.
Also, if you're interested in like watching exactly what we're talking about right now, there is a YouTube video online.
If you go to our YouTube channel, there's one video. One is private. The longer one is private on there, but the shorter one, the 10-minute one, is on there. And that shows him, I think, around week 3.
Week 3, yeah.
He was with us for almost 6 weeks, but he was here for training for 4 weeks. And then, unfortunately, one of the owners got a nasty case of COVID.
And then once they got COVID, then the whole family got COVID.
Yeah,
so it took
he
a
was
really
here
long
for
time.
almost like an extra 10 days or something.
Yeah.
But he was ready to go home in 4 weeks. I was so pleased with his progress. And I have to say, pleased with the owners. They were very diligent and very motivated to follow our instructions to the T. They took a lot of notes. They asked a lot of great questions. And they really did apply the work. They put the work in to get him to where he is now, which is a dog who's still sort of working through these, learning how to regulate his emotions. And the humans are also working through their ability to regulate when he does resource guard, right? So to make sure that they're not going in hot, that they're regulating and coming in calmly and doing very simple procedures to either take what he has away from him or ask him to drop it and then redirect him somewhere else. It's been a great outcome. I've been very, very proud of him.
He's a good boy. And, one of the things I really want to touch upon is trading. What do you think about trading and resource guarding?
So that's part of what we did with him, right? I am conflicted about trading because I think that it's super nuanced. So we're talking about trading. That is a way that you work with resource guarding, right? That you'll see that a lot if you put how to fix resource guarding. You'll see a lot of videos come up on YouTube, not all by people who know what the heck they're talking about or whatever. And so the theory is, if they have a shoe, you come in with a cookie and you offer the cookie, and then hopefully they drop the item and take the cookie, and you can take the item away, right? That's essentially trading. You're trading one object for another, a higher value object or whatever for the object that they have. It is not
simple as it sounds. It's not as simple as it sounds, because there's a type of trading that works really well for specific dogs. And then there's other types of trading. Like if he was a dick, trading is not really like on the table, in my opinion. Like if he had a bit of an edge to him, I would not be trading him things.
Yeah. And to me, I have a problem with the trading because it seems to be, you did something wrong, so I'm going to bribe you to do something right. And that might be really simplistic, and some trainers would take exception to that. For me, yes, he was getting a reward when he gave something up or dropped something. For sure, he was getting a reward. So I want it to be a reward and not a trade. Initially, though, I think it has to be a trade in order to get them to realize what is the result of you doing what I ask you to do, meaning give up that item. You're going to get a reward. In order to get there, you have to do a straight up trade. Yeah. And then you sort of pull back on the trade part a little bit and wait a little bit for the reward and start to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because then otherwise it starts to be chaining behavior of like, oh, I really want a cookie right now, so therefore I'm going to grab something that is not mine, and then mom's going to go get a cookie, and then I can get what I want. So then it starts to become this very toxic trading chaining loop.
Yes, and I think that a lot of times that's when they call us.
Yeah.
excuse me, I've been doing this and I haven't gotten any results. I'm doing the training.
It's actually been making it worse because now we're going through all these treats. And
right. So it's super, super nuanced. Pulling back on the trading and making it the reward for the behavior that you're asking, which is for you to drop the item. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think it's a necessary part of rewiring their emotional response, and we haven't really talked about that. Ultimately, what you have to do with resource guarding is change their emotional response to the whatever they're guarding, right? Mm-hmm. And that's certainly true with Buddy. His response was, I'm already feeling dysregulated. You're coming in hot and making me feel worse, right? We have to change that. And how do we change that? We try to add in a reinforcer, a positive reinforcer, so that they start to feel differently about the guarding. So last time we were there and we did the lesson, he was still picking things up. And it was interesting. You can very much predict when he's about to go get something. And it's usually when he's feeling bored or frustrated, right? So if you've just taken something from him and go, you can't have that, give me that. And you put the magazine back on the table. Now he's feeling some kind of way about that, right? So now he literally starts to scan the room looking for something else, which is why it's so important for him to have so many green items in the house that he can pick up and parade and carry around and feel good. Of course, he has to choose to take one of those green items. And then the second time he picked something up, I think we were standing around talking and we wanted him to just lay down. We asked him to go lay down and he was like, I don't want to go lay down. I'm bored. So he went over to the table and snatched her sweatshirt off the table, right? And their response was to start moving towards the kitchen. We took it around the corner into the kitchen. And I was like, no, we're going to stay here and call him to us, right? Because that's kind of what he wanted, us to pursue him.
Also, he is not a consumer, which makes resource guarding much easier. So I knew he wasn't going to take the sweatshirt and start ripping holes in the sweatshirt and tearing it apart and eating it. I knew he just wanted to carry it around and wanted everyone to follow him into the kitchen, which also is a different distinguishing kind of marker, because if he was a consumer or he was going to damage the item in any way, then I would have a long line on him.
Right.
And I would be stepping on that long line as he exited the room, and then I would be recalling him back.
And we told them that, and as frustrated and overwhelmed and upset they were with the resource guarding to begin with the whole thing, we kept reminding them that no, this is the best case scenario
of all the types of resource guarding. You have to be
a resource guarder. This is the best type of resource guarder you want, right? Because it's not based in genetics, not based in a breed characteristics. He's not a consumer, so he's not destroying and eating. Sometimes resource guarders will grab a rock or something and swallow it before you even hardly know they have it.
Yep.
Right. So that's a whole other ball game, because then they can get blockages super easily. Right. And he's not a dominant dog. So they had the best case scenario for sure for resource guarding.
And not all dogs will be like that.
No, but interesting. I mean, all of this could have been avoided from the beginning had they been more educated on how to raise a puppy. That being said, that's not a criticism of them, because it's a rare family that has the kind of knowledge to circumvent or prevent this behavior from escalating. As soon as they see the very subtle signs with a young puppy, we're going in and working on resource guarding and proofing the puppy from a young age, right? They didn't see it because they're just average people. Of course they wouldn't.
And plus, I mean, the media and all these people are telling you so many different things. Like, you should use a collar. No, you should use a harness. No, you should only be doing positive reinforcement. No balance training. No, only do negative. There's so many different things online these days.
It's hard to find
so
good
confusing.
For sure.
If I didn't know what I was doing, I would be lost.
Right.
So
no, I agree.
I don't really blame them.
Interestingly, Oliver that we sent home several weeks ago, Australian Shepherd, full grown, about 3 years old.
Yeah, he's about 3.
He was adopted by a family with young children as a full-grown dog, so as a rescue. So she hadn't had him that long. When he was with us before he came and when he was with us, he showed no resource guarding tendencies at all.
And if he did, we would have never taken him on because they have very young kids.
They have young kids.
So that's already, and then he's over 40 pounds.
Right.
So that's another, so we would have, if we saw any kind of resource guarding, we would have been like, no, you need to rehome this dog because you have young children.
Right.
And he's a big guy at this point, so he can really injure a child.
But what we saw is a crop up of resource guarding in the last couple of weeks. She reached out to us. With him, to me, it was really pretty clear that it was a control issue, that he was feeling uncomfortable in the environment and he was trying to control the environment. And again, they're going in hot. Not necessarily angry, going and retrieving stuff, but moving quickly and, saying, give it to me. You're not supposed to have, that kind of stuff. So that's really punishing. The dog interprets that as quite punishing. And again, he's trying to manage his control issues, right? He feels out of control in the environment for reasons we won't go into. And this is how he figured out makes him feel in control, right? And then it got worse and worse and worse. So he was pretty easy. At least he's been pretty easy thus far, with very simple instructions on, first of all, we're not going to pursue him when he takes something. If he takes a kid's toy and brings it over to his bed or into the crate, we're not going to go get it from him, right? Because that's going to make him feel more guardy.
I mean, if you think about it, he's taking something that he's claiming his, and he's going to his cave, which is his crate or a bed. And so not only is he resource guarding the objects, now he's resource guarding something, an area that he calls his. So now it's like adding even more fuel to the fire. And now you're going hot, so you're adding even more fuel to the fire, and that's going to elicit a bite or whatever.
And they have young kids. So I was really very concerned about this. Although he showed no resource guarding tendencies to the kids. So the little kids could go take things from him, which gives us information, right? Why is he letting them take things? Because the issue is over the parents, right? It's over feeling uncomfortable on what's expected from the two adults in the house. Not to say that he couldn't resource guard towards the kids, which is what I was concerned about. Just because he's not doing that now doesn't mean he won't start doing that with the kids. So we need to deal with this immediately. This is a potential, bite on a young child.
Yeah.
So yes, she took my advice. My advice was very simple. We're not going to pursue him when he grabs something. We're going to call him to us, and we're going to simply trade. So
also, on the other hand, kind of going back to like what we were talking about in the beginning, is because we had him for training already, and we worked on not just obedience, but kind of like the whole picture of the dog. It was really easy for them to implement these new routines because he already kind of had the concept of coming and sitting and getting a treat. And so it was really easy for them to kind of change that mindset because he felt out of control. And how do you feel in control is by doing something you know. And what did he know? Obedience. So let's work on his obedience and things that he's strong in. So then things that he feels out of control in, he feels control over here.
Right. Exactly. Good. That's a very good description. And that is something we didn't touch on with Buddy, right? So he came to us with zero manners, zero control for obedience, right? Really quite spoiled.
And no concept of that we're trying to tell him something. Like he really had no idea that we were communicating something to him.
Right.
He was very detached from the human.
He was living sort of a parallel life rather than having a relationship. And that's the other thing, right? When you're working with a dog, it's all about relationship. If you don't spend the time to build a relationship, and you need the skills in order to do that, right? So they need to understand what they want, what we want from them. We do that through obedience and teaching them some words and commands and consistent reinforcement, right? That builds relationship. And then once you have the relationship, if you have things go awry, like suddenly Oliver resource guarding, you have the foundation there that you can then say, okay, what do I do with that? Okay, so we're going to do a straight up trade initially, which is what she did. The advice was you call him to you with something high value, right? Which people my age and older are going to be like very bristly about because it's like you're rewarding the behavior. Trust me when I say you're not, and that this has to be done because you have to change the emotional response to what's going on, right? So the advice was to call him to her have something tasty. Hopefully he'll either leave the item on the bed and come to her and get a treat, in which case you can quietly later on walk over and take the item away and put it away. Again, you can't go pursuing that item as soon as you give him the treat, because then it's a rush back to the item, right? Or if he were to come to you, maybe drop it on the way, or come all the way to you, but drop it at your feet as you're then trading, and then you can just sort of put your foot over it, subtly. Redirect him. Okay, go play. Good boy, go play. And then quietly pick the item up. So that was my advice. Once she started doing that, the resource guarding diminished precipitously, right? And now she says he hasn't had any incidents of resource guarding in the last 3 days at all. And even one time he did grab something, she said, and he just dropped it and walked away. So again, coming about it from a compassionate, kind, positive mindset, so changes their emotional response so they feel better about it, and it doesn't become a negative self-regulation habit.
So one of my favorite quotes that I heard right before we got Buddy was, without relationship creates rebellion. And that's exactly what this is.
Right.
Is if you don't have a relationship with your dog, and that's not mean I love him so much. I just love him. No, that's not the type of relationship we're looking for. We're looking for companionship.
That's slave. That's being a slave to your dog, right? It's not a relationship.
Yeah,
it's not a two-way street. It's me serving the dog, right? It also shouldn't be the other way around. The dog's serving you.
Yeah.
It has to be a two-way street.
Yep.
With Buddy, the owner's like, well, we give him so much attention. We play with him all the time. We give him all these cookies. And my response was, well, stop that. That's ridiculous. Right?
He needs
how
to
far did that
earn
get
those
you?
things.
How's that going for you?
Yeah. Well,
right?
He needs to earn these things. I would love to give you cookies all day. Give me something. Give me a reason to give you a cookie.
Right.
Do a sit, do a down.
And also, if you want your dog to listen to you, be someone worth listening to.
Yep.
That was, I heard a trainer say that the other day, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. You want your dog to listen to you, be someone worth listening to.
Yep.
Right? So there is a piece that's respect, but there's also, relationship is not only built on, it can't be built on fear. It has to be built on, yes, I respect your boundaries because you're consistent in asking for them and reinforcing them.
You respect me, I respect you.
Yep.
We trust each other.
And look what happens when things go well. I feel so good. So once Buddy and once Oliver saw the flip side, which is if you give this item up or don't pick it up to begin with, look at all the wonderful things that happen. The neural pathway and reward center in the brain for that, we hope, is going to be more high value than the tendency to guard, right? And that's not always the case when you're talking about guarding breeds, right? There's such a strong desire,
genetic urge
to complete that loop, that you can't always get to that other side where the rewards that I'm going to give you are going to be bigger than that. So that becomes much harder because you have to satisfy the hardwiring urge in different ways by working with them in very specific play scenarios and obedience scenarios and things like that. In order to satisfy that urge so they don't feel the need to resource guard in other areas. And that is absolutely attainable, but not for the average person. And it's never 100%. So we have to make sure that there are no kids involved in that.
And this is why you need to do research before just going out and getting any breed.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do a whole episode on how I think people who breed pet purebred dogs designed to be, so in other words, people like me, okay, who take the Australian Shepherd and try to breed them in such a way to make really good companions, not
for the
farm
average
dogs.
household.
Right, because our clientele are families. So if I breed my high drive dog with another high drive dog and create high drive puppies, where are those puppies going? Right?
Not on a farm.
Right. So I don't want to go off on that tangent because we're going to talk about that in an entire other episode. But that's what we're talking about with doing your research, right? We can't change genetics. And sometimes people aesthetically see a dog and they're like, well, that's what I want. I don't care.
I love it.
I don't care to think about what the genetics might bring out in this dog and make it incompatible with my life.
I don't even think people think about it that way.
No,
they
they
think
don't.
it's a pretty dog. I want it done. Yeah. And then they
talk about emotional response.
Yeah.
It's not, And then when they do the research, you got to be careful who you listen to.
You can go online and you can find anything that will reinforce what you want to hear.
Right.
Coffee's good for you? Yeah, it's good for you.
Right.
Coffee's bad for you? Yeah, it's bad for you.
Validation, bias validation, or I forget what the term is, but yes, right. You can find anything that says, yes, that's exactly what I thought. Right. Yeah. So of course you want to be careful about who you listen to. Mm-hmm. So we've gone quite a bit now, so we probably should wind this up.
Yeah.
Resource guarding is an interesting topic. I think we'll touch on it more maybe in the future because it's there's a lot of pieces and parts to it. A lot
it's
of types.
Always growing and evolving too. It's not one of those things that's just stagnant and this is what it is.
It's also something that
nuanced.
When you've worked around it, when you have a workaround at home, it's not something that just disappears then. It's something that you will have to work around for the life of that dog. Now, as they age and mature and mellow with age, it will get better, likely, if you follow the protocols. But it's a lot more work. And you hope that the dog then that comes out of that is so wonderful that it encourages the people to continue making that dog toe the line and themselves towing the line and making sure that the management system is in place and the dog can be successful, because the dog we get because of that is just wonderful. Not all families can do that. Not all families have the commitment to follow through like that. And those are the sad cases for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So that was a longie.
Mm-hmm.
Resource guarding is an interesting topic. So, next week, maybe we'll talk about pet dog breeders and how they have a bad name.
Yeah.
And I believe it's doing God's work.
Yeah. Well, that's because it's you. So.
Not necessarily me, but certainly I believe in the philosophy. So we'll talk about that next week.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. So that's it for this episode. All right, guys. We'll see you next time on Dog for Thought. And remember to like, subscribe, follow. That really helps us out to know that you are following and subscribing. That helps my numbers, helps us get this podcast out to more people. So do that for us, please. Thank you. See you guys next time. Bye. Dog for Thought is written and hosted by me, Sarah Brown, co-hosted by Sophie Brown, produced, edited, and original music by Jacob Brown. Don't forget to like and subscribe.